The House Energy and Commerce Committee unanimously advanced a piece of legislation that could either require the Chinese parent company of TikTok to divest its ownership of the social media giant or ban its use altogether here in the United States. And Congress could be voting on that legislation as soon as this week. So this all, by the way, is coming as the threat that's posed by China continues to intensify. In fact, the Communist Party of China recently confirmed that it is going to be increasing its military spending this year by 7.2% in 1 year. Wow. Earlier today, the heads of various U.S. intelligence agencies testified before the Senate Intelligence Committee on the growing threat from China and other nations. And joining me now with his thoughts on all of this is Gordon Chang. He's the Distinguished Fellow at the Gatestone Institute. He's the author of The Coming Collapse of China and China is Going to War. And by the way, you can follow Gordon on X under the handle at Gordon G. Chang, and I encourage you to do so. Gordon, always great to have you on Washington Watch. Thank you for coming back.
Well, thank you so much, Jody.
Well, listen, you are such an expert on China. How in the world, Gordon, did we get to this place that we are now? And what kind of, I'm sure some people are asking, what is the national security threat that TikTok poses?
Well, TikTok poses two primary threats. One of them is it steals data from 170 million devices in the United States. And the second is that Beijing uses it to propagate its narratives. And some of those narratives, it's not just Russian disinformation about the Ukraine war or what Beijing thinks on a particular topic, but things like promotion of illegal drug use, self-harm, all of these social issues that China wants to actually destroy a generation of American youth. And the question is, how did we get here? Well, it's because, at least since Eisenhower, we have not had an American president who has declared the Communist Party of China to be America's enemy. Matter of fact, President Biden won't even call them an adversary. He just says they're a competitor. Well, they're not competing with us within the existing international system, Jody. They're trying to take that system down and replace it with worldwide Chinese rule.
Unbelievable that our leaders cannot recognize that or refuse to recognize it. Probably is a better way to describe all of this. So now we come to this legislation dealing with TikTok. And of course, we have some lawmakers that's saying that it's not a ban, but it would provide TikTok's parent company either 6 months to divest its ownership or potentially then a ban. How do you think all this is going to play out?
I hope that the Biden administration will force a change in ownership after that legislation passes. There are a lot of actually powerful forces in both parties that are rooting for TikTok. And this is a problem. The American people need to understand that we have a disease in our political system. And it's not just Marxist Democrats. It's also conservative Republicans who have, for very different reasons, but for different reasons, support Communist Party narratives. And so we've got to make sure that people start to understand that national security issues must predominate because we have an enemy that is trying to destroy our society. And we cannot allow ideologies or even this notion of free trade to prevent us from defending ourselves.
And you call it right. We have a political enemy here who is trying to take us down. And what more wise, clever way of doing so than with an innocent app like TikTok that just seems so fun and enjoyable, and yet it is being used so maliciously. And all of this, Gordon, I wanted to ask you about this because all of this is coming at a time that we are hearing right now that China's military spending is increasing 7.2% this year. They're going up to over $230 billion for 2024. And that is happening, as you well know, as its own GDP growth is not meeting the targets, the goals that they were hoping that their own GDP. So their GDP is weak, and yet they are spending more militarily. What do we make of this?
Yeah, this is a very important point, Jody, that a lot of people have been ignoring. And that is, we don't know exactly how fast China's military spending is. We know what they tell us. It's probably not what they tell us, but it's evident, and it's been evident for quite some time, that the Chinese military is spending at the increases in the Chinese military budget are much higher than increases in gross domestic product, which means that China, I think, eventually is going to run out of money, because it's not just the military, it's Belt and Road, it's internal security, it's all of their other projects that they have. And that means, I think, that Xi Jinping must be seeing a closing window of opportunity, that he realizes that if he doesn't move soon, he will not be able to move at all, which means that he could take us by surprise.
Well, yeah, and nobody understands their economy as much as you do that I'm aware of. So does this, though, increase in military spending in the midst of all this, like we're talking about, does this show what that really Xi Jinping's desire ultimately is to replace current international order with communism? Is that what he's trying to do?
Absolutely. He actually has been talking about this notion of Tianxia, or all under heaven, where Chinese emperors believed that they not only had the mandate of heaven to rule what they called Tianxia, but also heaven compelled them to do so. And, we ignore what Xi Jinping and his subordinates have been saying, but they've made it quite clear. They do not think that the United States should be considered a sovereign state. And by the way, the extermination of the American people, not just killing a few of us, but the extermination of the American people, is a permitted topic in China's tightly controlled public square. So, we Americans have been put on notice. We didn't listen to Osama bin Laden in the 1990s. We didn't even listen to him after he killed 6 Americans in 1993 at the North Tower of the World Trade Center. Well, we're not listening to the Chinese right now.
Well, we better start listening up. There's a huge threat out there, a huge monster in the room, if you will, and we better start paying attention to it. Thank you, Gordon Chang. Always great to have you on the program. Thanks for your input.
Well, thank you, Jody. I really appreciate it.